welcome everybody to the June meeting of the Williamson County chapter of the Native Plant Society of Texas. I'm Beth Irwin, your president. I threw this fun picture in that I took 2 days ago up at, if you think this is October, just because it feels like August or October outside, it's not, it's June. And this is up at Barbara Wright's. She said one day I had 1 or 2, and then I had 3 or 4, and now she's got clouds of them on her fresh blooming Greg's Mist. With these, okay, well, I was up there getting your American basket flowers. So. All right, first thing up is our field trips. We had to cancel the Lake Wetlands field trip in May because of issues they had, nobody to guide us around and so forth. And so the next one is this Saturday morning.
We will be there.
And you okay? So it says they will be there.
Pray to God for Wednesday.
Yes,
Wear the
she's
sunscreen or bring a big umbrella.
right.
We're not going to be in the shade.
Okay, it lasts until 11 o'clock, or you all give out, one or the other. So,
It may be short.
and we've rescheduled the Lake Waco wetlands and Mammoth National Monument to October. Hidden Springs is up towards Florence and Gerald in the direct Florence. The directions are on the website announcement. And the gate is only open for a narrow window of time. And I have nothing to do with that. I would like to, as much as I am about being on time, but you've got to be there, and then the gate is closed and the survey begins.
Because we're going to be walking near there.
Oh, you're going to be walking inside of the road.
Inside. There's a lot of horse cripplers.
Oh, a lot of horse cripplers.
Horse crippler cats.
Don't wear your sandals, okay? Okay. I want to thank Belinda and John Boucher. They adopted a kiosk. Y'all might have seen this on the blog at Southwest Regional County Park. And they've got some of our nice plant signs on there. This is near the Jim Rogers Trail. And we did have a Memorial Day walk on the Jim Rogers Trail to see the new plant signs and so forth. And we had a good time. We had Belinda's grandchildren with us. And just, it's a nice evening. And we did have a breeze. All right, this month's free plant for the in-person attendees, sorry Zoomers, is the American basket flower, Centaurea americana. It's a wonderful nectar plant. It's an annual, so you have to let it go to seed. It is related to thistle, but it does not have the stickiness. It gets the name basket flower because of the bud, or this area under here that holds the flowers. Looks like basket. And I've got cultural information on a sheet over there. You can take a picture of it, and there's a QR code that takes you to the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center page for it. And it doesn't have deer information, but you say they eat the flowers off? The flowers are probably cotton candy. Like, they probably taste good to us if we were to buy them, because they have that much nectar. So. And they are a larval host for the hummingbird sphinx moth. That'll be important to you later tonight. All right, these are our upcoming programs, and Susie and I are super excited. You just can't complain about programs like that. I mean, that's just, you know, eclectic. You've got all these different things that we're going to talk about, and, you know, simple things and complex things. But we are covered until Christmas, when we'll probably just eat and spend money. Right, I was asked to clarify, those of you that saw last month's program, Ricky Lennox, why streams do what they do. Fabulous program, just wonderful. But I was unclear on the book and the guide, and I realized why I was when I went back in there. That's what we gave. Winners were Mary and David, but Your Remarkable Riparian is a book written by Steve Nell, and he is affiliated with the Nueces River Authority. And then the owner's manual, and then packaged with that from American Seed is a third little pamphlet that is managing invasives. And I could not find managing invasives. I could not find that pamphlet to give you an indication of what that is. I did find, and the 3 things are $44 from Native American Seed. you can get the owner's manual and Remarkable Riparian in print form from remarkableriparian.org, which is Steve's website. But you can get the owner's manual. You have them. That's right, because you're the Mary from Georgetown that won. That's right. Okay. I should have had you text me the pictures.
Here's the invasive stuff.
Okay, the Remarkable Riparian owner's manual. This could be downloaded from that website, remarkableriparian.org. And then this is
That's the invasive.
troubleshooting. Oh, Texas Parks and Wildlife publication, troubleshooting invasive plants, a pocket guide for riparian landowners.
I'll take a picture of these.
Okay, so you get all three of those, $44 from Native American Seed. And this guy, he's got some amazing stuff. In fact, Susan, we probably ought to get him for a speaker if we can. He's got some pretty interesting publications to download on his website. So, all right. Tonight, we're giving away the book that Erin Cord recommended that we give, Native Host Plants for Texas Moss. Just came out in February 22. And whoever the in-person is, I actually have the book here to give you tonight when we do the drawing. And there will be a Zoom participant who will also win a copy, and it will be mailed to you. Right, I'm doing a personal plug for this book. I read it a few years ago. And because of the weather we are having now in June, it's less than $7 for the Kindle version from the mothership. And it's been out long enough that you can get used versions of it, but it has got some amazing, simple techniques dating back 2,000 years from people that have farmed and grown things in the desert. And it's more like a manual. It's got a lot of how-to in it. It'll tell you what you need, but then this is how you do it. And some of you that have been out with me on tree installation know that some of it is just scraping up a little levee on the down the hill side of whatever it is you're planting. Because when you're just getting 33 inches of rain a year, even dew counts for that plant. So anything you can catch helps. But I'm just plugging it, and I'm telling you, it's a great book. He's a PhD in Southern California, reestablishing in the desert plants and woody plants in the desert. So. All right, turning it over to Randy Pensabene, our immediate past president, who has the unenviable task of finding our next slate of officers.
All right. Actually, it's not bad. I have a team that works with me, Nancy Copperman and also Erin Buell. And some of the board is transitioning on their second year. And those are always the harder spots. But here's the election committee, and the positions may have more than one nominee on the ballot. So you've been getting some emails on this. And if you do nominate somebody, you must obtain their permission, and you can send those nominations to the Wilco chapter site, and Pat will get the email to us. So members are emailed the link at the end of June. She said early July is when she's going to do it. Email a link to the ballot, and only members will be able to vote. So the email will only go out to members. And then the results will be announced at our July chapter meeting. And so that'll be a lot of fun to bring in the new board. And they begin on September 1. So that's it. Nope, I got one more.
Yep.
Oh, here we go. I forgot. Only made these 2 days ago. Anyway, so Beth Irwin, this would be her second year. This is she's nominated for president again. Cindy Chrysler, vice president. Nancy Copperman is secretary, treasurer. Erin has had a second year, so Ann Adams has graciously agreed to help. And Vicki Blockman is available for a second year. And then Mark Stotzer will replace Charles Newsom as a director as the nominee. And again, more than one nominee is allowed and encouraged. So if you have somebody you think would be good, and even if they don't make it this election, you know, maybe the next year. We do this every year. So we're always looking for more good people. And that's been difficult with the COVID and not meeting the new members and such. And the director positions especially, you don't really have to know a lot about native plants. So we like to bring in new people and get fresh ideas for the group. So I encourage you to send nominations in. Thank you. Thank you, Beth.
Information about our meetings. You see this one every week, so you know, as far as I know, we are still meeting at the library through the upcoming month. In years past, we have not been able to meet at the library in the summer, but Nancy Copperman nailed it down this year. So, right. And this is, I've changed this slide since the last 4, and that is to include this, founded in 1997. Our chapter is now 25 years old. And it's interesting to me because I'm a charter member of another Native Plant Society organization, 40 something years, I think. And people in Native Plant Societies are not real sentimental about this kind of thing. It's just, we just rather look at plants and bugs and all that kind of stuff. So no, I sent out a notice to the board. Would you please, just send me a line or 2. And so now I'm asking the membership. No, if you could send us, we're not trying to put anybody on the spot. What do you think the most important, accomplishment of the Williamson County Native Plant Society chapter has been in 25 years, even if it happened last year, whatever, or what do you like about it? I don't care how long you've been a member. It doesn't, just, I can make a fruit salad blog out of member comments if they're just, 4 or 5 words. So we'd like to get some input. We have 1 charter member, and she has promised to do a blog post, and Randy's working on a plant sale, history of the plant sale blog post. But and next month we'll have cookies, and maybe Jane will make some of them. If there's not, we don't want to wish for a tornado, even though we'd like for some rain. You get cookies anyway. You can contact us through these or find us. You can look at our previous, a lot of our previous programs are on YouTube. And so anyway, all right. I got to hear Erin speak like a month and a week ago at another convention. And she was just great. And I was so glad we had already booked her for us. But she's a real enthusiastic person about going out in the woods, and she's like me. She's not worried about snakes. She just plows out in there, and she loves native plants. And Sue's cringing up here. No, I'm not gonna wear my sandals around horse cripplers, but the rattlesnakes, they're fine. So they'll stay in their lane, and I'll stay in mine. She is in charge. She is with Bat Conservation International, and she's community engagement manager. And she has, I don't know what she's going to tell you about herself. She can tell you anything she wants to about herself, because we won't know otherwise. But anyway, she does have a master's from A&M Kingsville. Yes, I knew that. That appeals to this crowd. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Hi. Like Beth said, thank you for that lovely intro. My name is Erin. I'm the Community Engagement Manager at Bat Conservation International. And I'm going to talk to you guys first, just kind of a little Bats 101, and then talk more about our Gardening for Bats program, which I'm really excited about. And this sign will eventually be available to the public. We just got it designed, but the idea is to kind of start encouraging people to make bat gardens kind of all over the place. So this could be yours one day. But this is just a very fancy prototype I printed up. Okay, there we go. So how many of you are familiar with BCI, Bat Conservation International? Okay. That's all right, cool. So we are a nonprofit. We were founded in 1982, so we just had our 40-year anniversary, which is exciting. Our mission is very, very simple. We just want to end bat extinctions worldwide, and that's kind of what all the work we do is focused towards. Initially, BCI was founded in the 80s when there was this very strong public perception against bats. It was very negative. There was a lot of misinformation out there. And they actually ended up moving BCI from our original location in Milwaukee to Austin. And at the time, people thought they were nuts because Austin was kind of the nexus of this like human bat conflict because of the Congress Street Bridge. They had built it, I think in 1985, and a bunch of bats moved in, which wasn't what they wanted. And people were freaking out. There's actually, you can look at news articles from back then about, you know, people claiming they were attacked by bats, you know, all this just crazy stuff, which now is so funny because Austin is such a, like, we're a bat city. Like, that's part of who we are. And like, they hated it. So BCI was like, we're going to go to where there's this like a huge human bat conflict, and we're going to kind of change hearts and minds. So we started pretty much doing this work in Austin. A lot of our initial work was just trying to change that public perception. So one of our original founders, Merlin Tuttle, which some of you may know of Merlin Tuttle, he's this really fantastic bat photographer, and he took a lot of pictures of bats, kind of these profile shots, which if you Google a bat species in the US, you will find a Merlin Tuttle photo. And it was kind of the first time people saw photos of bats where they weren't looking really scary, because often people would take pictures of bats, they'd be holding them. The bats are obviously don't know what's going on, so they're trying to echolocate to figure that out. And they just look like they're screaming, you know, and you can see their little teeth, and it looks like the bat's really angry. But Merlin's pictures were kind of, you know, the bat's just looking very chill, profile shot. They're actually very cute, I think. The term sky puppies is a hashtag. If you want to go down a rabbit hole, feel free. So yeah, it was just kind of this idea of getting people to realize that bats aren't scary. They're actually really cool. They're very adorable, and they do all this amazing stuff for us that's really important. So I think BCI, you know, along with a lot of other groups and volunteers and people, have worked really hard. And although there is still obviously some negative perception around bats, I think people are generally much more pro-bat in the world, which is great. And we're happy for that. And this is a Mexican free-tailed bat, which are the bats that live under the bridge. So aren't they adorable, right? So cute. All right, so I made this video just to give you a sense of the diversity of bats. So there are over 1,400 species of bats in the world, which is quite a lot when you think about just they're mammals, obviously, just like we are. But in terms of diversity of mammals, it's really, really amazing. So about 1/3 of all mammals are bats. And so I made this video of different bat faces, so you could just get a sense of diversity. So just enjoy. They're flying foxes. I love this guy, the ghost face bat. They have a lot of different noses and kind of adaptations depending on where they live. Different ears. Different levels of cuteness depending on your preference, you know. This one is, oh, that last one, wait, I'll go back to him. The wrinkle. No, I can't do that. All right, I'm just gonna watch it again. Sorry. All right, yeah, so that's a ghost face bat. That is a Texas bat, which is very exciting, which has the wonderful genus Mormoops, which is probably the best genus I can think of. Just fun to say. That's a Jamaican flower bat. They're all kind of from all over the world. The flying foxes are not in the US. They are kind of on, yeah, we're Eastern Hemisphere. That is the wrinkle face bat, one of my favorites. There we go. So yeah, just to give you a sense, there's so much diversity within the world of bats, and they have so many different niches that they inhabit. And because of that, they do so many different things for ecosystems, and they're often considered kind of a keystone species, which is kind of a species that supports kind of an entire ecosystem through, you know, kind of what they do. So bats are very important. Unfortunately, they're also very, very much at risk. This is just in the United States. About 30% or 1/3 of our bats in the US are considered the most impaired, like very either endangered or threatened. And so they're the most imperiled terrestrial vertebrate on the continent. So our US bats really, really need our help. And there's a lot of reasons for why this is, you know, I don't know how familiar you all are with white nose syndrome. Yeah, so that's been really devastating. That is a disease caused by a fungus that was first brought to the US. We're not exactly sure how, probably from a cave in Europe. Somebody who was in a cave in Europe didn't clean their boots and went to a cave in New York in 2006, brought the fungus in, and it's killed millions and millions of bats. And there's actually 3 different species that have lost about 90% of their population from white nose syndrome. And it's very transferable. You know, the bats, obviously, it mostly affects bats that hibernate. And I can talk about more if you guys want to get into white nose, but that's been a real issue. There's issues with climate change, habitat loss, urbanization, all the kind of normal things that impact wildlife. And there's also a complicated relationship with bats and wind energy too, which is very complicated because we all love renewable energy, but there are some species of bats that do have kind of a high, are more impacted by wind turbines for various reasons. And actually one bat is potentially going to get listed mainly because of mortality due to wind turbines, the hoary bat. So it's a complicated thing, but there's a lot of reasons why our bats are imperiled. So let's talk about some fun stuff now. Bat baskets. So I'd like to start out with kind of the common bat myths, and I'm sure you guys have heard of them. Does anybody want to throw one out that you've heard, maybe related to this? Pictures? Rabies, yes. So a lot of people think that most bats or bats commonly have rabies. That is not true. So any mammal can have rabies. About 1% of bats have rabies. They're not more likely to get it than any other mammal. The issue is that usually when people encounter bats, it's during, they might see one during the day. It might be on the ground. So that's a sick bat. But generally we don't encounter all the healthy bats that are out there. They're kind of doing their thing at night. They're not interacting us at all. And then another issue too is people, they see a sick bat on the ground and they might pick it up. That's a no-no for wildlife, right? Don't pick up wildlife unless, if you're wearing gloves, obviously be really safe, but you want to call a bat rehabilitator. We have a great one here, Austin Bat Refuge. They're fantastic, but bats don't necessarily have more rabies than any other mammal. It's just something that's often associated with them because when people do interact with them, it can be a sick bat. Oh, any other ones? What do you guys see here?
Stuck in your hair.
They do, yeah. I have had people swear that bats want to nest in your hair. I don't know what that's about. It's kind of an old school one, I think. For this, I always like to tell people bats are amazingly good at echolocation, which means they use sound to get around at night. And they can echolocate something as fine as the width of one human hair. So they're that good at it. So they're not going to crash into your head. They're not trying to get in your head. They don't want anything to do with you. But that's definitely one that people will say definitively that is true, and it's not. What else? Blind as a bat. Has anyone ever heard blind as a bat? My grandma used to say that all the time. So bats are actually, they're not blind. They see about as well as we do, and it does depend on the species, but because they use echolocation, that's how they get around at night. So they see fairly well, and they use sound to get around. So they kind of have this amazing superpower, really. The other one is, I hear this a lot too, bats are rats with wings or rodents with wings, kind of just this idea that bats are really pest species. They're not actually related. They're not in the rodent family for mammals. They're actually more closely related taxonomically to horses than rodents. Let that sink in for a minute. Did I just blow your mind? I think so. Yeah, so they're not actually very closely related to rodents taxonomically. And also rodents have a lot of babies, right? That's why we don't love them. If you have rats in your shed, if you have mice in your shed, you're going to have a lot of generations in 1 year. Bats usually give birth to one baby each year. So they have a really slow reproductive rate compared to their size. So they are very, very different from rodents in that way. And then the last is all bats are vampire bats, or bats are going to suck your blood. They're going to attack you. So I will say we have no vampire bats in the US yet. Climate change may change that, which will be interesting. But as I said, there's over 1,400 species of bats in the world. Only 3 of those are vampire bats. Only 3 species out of over 1,400 are actually considered vampire bats that feed on blood. Only one out of the 3 specializes on mammals. The other 2 actually feed on bird blood. So only 1 out of 1,400 is a true vampire bat. They live in Latin and South America, so we don't have them here. And they don't really suck blood. They kind of go up to something. They actually will walk on the ground to sneak up on their prey, which is a really fun YouTube rabbit hole as well. And they bite, and they have sort of a numbing agent in their bite so the prey doesn't feel it. And they have an anticoagulant in their saliva, and they actually lap the blood up like a kitten. So they don't suck the blood. They're like little kittens drinking blood, which is adorable, right? So much better. And then, as I said, bats are mammals. So they're just like us. And actually their wings, as you can see here, are just modified bones of the hand and arm, the same bones that we have. So they're actually doing this when they're flying. So it's kind of like jazz hands. Kids love to do this. Just go like this. Feel free. And this just kind of gives you a sense of, so their wings are actually, they're very long fingers with kind of this skin membrane between them. And their thumb is that little thing sticking up there. So bats, as I said, echolocate, which is a really awesome thing that they can do. They're basically screaming all the time, if you think about it, because they're trying to find stuff based on sound. So they're sending sound out into the world, and the sound will bounce back off of something. And that's how they kind of zone in on what they're hunting. They're hunting insects or something like that. So you might be thinking, okay, if they're screaming all the time, we can't hear them, right? Because it's at a higher frequency than our ears can hear. Thank goodness. Because can you imagine how loud the Congress Avenue Bridge would be if we could hear them? It's just like millions of bats screaming all at once. And they also actually, when they open their mouths to do this, they dislocate one of the bones in their ear temporarily. And that's how they do this without deafening themselves. So they're screaming all the time, not deafening themselves. And that is how they're getting around. And they're really, really good at it. So I do have a video that I want to show. So you can see there's a spider right here. You're going to see a bat come in and then he's echolocating. You're not going to be able to hear it, but you'll see he kind of changes course and then goes for that spider. The spider has no chance. It's pretty cool. They use their tail as kind of a scoop to scoop up insects in the air. I'll let you watch it one more time. And then this one, oh, I'm excited you can actually hear it. This is good. I usually do this program virtually and I can't figure out how to make my sound on Zoom. It's a whole thing. But this one, they've actually lowered the frequency so you can hear it. And what here you're gonna see, this is a moth right here. And the bat's gonna come in from underneath. But when they get close to their prey, they kind of do a faster and faster sound. And when they actually capture something, it's called a terminal buzz, which is sort of like a raspberry noise, like a. So if you're listening to bat calls and you hear that, you're like, oh, he just ate a moth. So let's see if you can hear it. I don't know if I can make it louder. Can you guys hear that? Yeah, and then scoops it up. So yeah, we do a lot of, if you have a bat detector, there's actually a really cool, relatively affordable bat detector that goes with your cell phone. You can actually hear the terminal buzz happening and you're like, okay, that bat just caught a moth. It's very cool. And kids like the raspberry nuts. Yeah.
The echolocation, does it just tell us that there's something there, or is it so refined that they know it's an insect?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're really good at figuring out kind of the shape and like kind of the pattern because they're hunting generally the same thing all the time. So they're really good at kind of figuring out what's what. But you know, you've heard stories like people say they'll kind of like throw up things in the air and the bat will go for it. So sometimes they can get confused, but generally they're really good at finding kind of the prey that they really like. Yeah. Any other questions? Feel free. Yeah, just. Okay, so talking a little bit more about diversity, the biggest bat in the world is the golden crowned flying fox that has a 6-foot wingspan. So it's kind of like a flying wiener dog, which is either terrifying or great, depending on where you think about small dogs. They're very cute too. These guys live mostly in the South Pacific. We don't have them here. And then the smallest bat in the world is the bumblebee bat, which is about 3 inches, very, very tiny. So that just gives you a sense of the massive diversity of bats just in size. And so bats are important for a lot of reasons. I think this is the one people tend to think of the most. Bats are really wonderful at pest control. I get a lot of questions about bats and mosquitoes. Like, okay, I've got a bunch of mosquitoes in my yard. I want to put up a bat house. Will they eat all my mosquitoes? Like sometimes, yes. But yeah, they've done a study where they estimated they save US farmers about $23 billion annually from eating pests of crops. And that's I can send you guys that study if you want to read it. It's pretty amazing. They eat so many ag pests. And actually the ones that are at the bridge and Congress Avenue, and then the Bracken Cave Preserve, which is kind of between San Antonio and Austin, that's about 20 million bats. The bridge in San Antonio or in Austin is about 1.5 million. They all go east and they just feed off the ag fields that are on the east of there. Yeah. Yeah, so they're just eating pest insects, basically. Oh, yeah, so he was saying, can you give some examples of pest control? So what I mean by that is they're eating the insects that are attacking our crop species, basically. So kind of all the things that you guys might have in your garden, like, you'll find like caterpillars or grubs on like your kale and your cauliflower. Most of those are moth species. And so bats really, really love the things that are generally considered kind of ag pests, and they eat a ton of them. So that means farmers have to use less pesticide to deal with that. Yeah, they definitely eat mosquitoes too. Definitely, yeah.
How bad are the bats affected by the pesticides?
It can really, really affect them because they're eating them, and that poison can kind of build up in their system. So that's one of the things we always kind of recommend is gardening as organically as you can, and farmers I think are trying to find that line as well. But yeah, it can definitely impact them. That's one of the reasons that a lot of bats are in decline, kind of a contributing factor. Yeah, good questions. Oh yeah. No, so thankfully, because then I would have a lot harder to talk about gardening for bats. No, so they don't interact with butterflies because butterflies are out during the day. So they're generally feeding on the nighttime pollinators, which we're not as attached to, I think, as humans. They're not as charismatic. So no, they're not eating monarchs or anything like that. They prefer moths, beetles, and then a lot of different fly species too. So things that generally come out at night. Yeah, great question. I get that one a lot too. They're like, are they eating my monarchs? No, promise, they're not. So another thing bats are important for is they are pollinators. So we actually don't have any pollinating bats here. All the bats in our area are insectivorous or insect-eating bats, but pollinating bats are in kind of the Southwest US, and then there's a ton of pollinating bats in other parts of the world. A very fun equation. How many of you like margaritas? Okay, it's okay. So yeah, bats are the sole pollinators of the agave plant, pictured here, which is used to make tequila. So without bats, we would not have tequila. So just keep that in mind. It's very important. Yeah, she gets it. So yeah, they pollinate about 500 ecologically and economically important plants. A lot of the wild types of a lot of the fruit that we eat. So, you know, if you have a banana plantation and they're growing a bunch of bananas, it's generally kind of one type of banana, like one genetic makeup, but then bats are pollinating wild bananas that they sometimes use to like mix with the plants that they're growing to kind of keep the population healthy. So yeah, wild types of a lot of our fruits, mangoes, papayas, bananas, all sorts of yummy things. And then there you go. Just what I was saying, I forgot about this slide. And then I have a video of a pollinating bat, and it's taken in a lab. So imagine, if you will, this is a flower, this is nectar down here, and it's going to show you the bat's going to come in with its, and it's going to slip the nectar up, but they're really efficient pollinators because they get really far into the flower to feed. So if you can imagine, there's his little tongue, little straw, slurp. They get tons of pollen on them. So they're really good at transferring pollen from plant to plant, and they also carry the pollen a lot farther too, which is wonderful for diversity and just genetic diversity. So yeah, that's a cool video. Oh, there we go. The last thing I'm going to talk about really fast is bats are really important for seed dispersal. This is generally in areas of rainforests that have been clear cut, you know, that look like this. And there's a lot of clear cutting going on in rainforests, and you know, a lot of wildlife will not cross this. And so you don't really get the seeds that would normally be dispersed by wildlife in these areas because it really does look like a threat. It's very exposed. Well, fruit eating bats, you know, they're eating all this fruit, and their guano, which is a fancy word for bat poop, has a lot of seeds in it. So they're going to fly across this. You know, they have no problem flying across this. So about 95% of the new growth in clear-cut areas is from fruit-eating bats. So all these kind of pioneer plants that are revegetating these clear-cut areas are from bats generally. So they're really important for that. So, okay, now you love bats, right? Yay. Does anyone not like bats? No judgment, just wondering. It's okay. Okay, so I was going to talk a little bit about gardening for bats, going to switch gears. This is actually a pilot garden we did at the Travis County BCP Snowden House. I don't know if anyone's been down there. It's really lovely. This is a lot of Travis County Nipsop people. Hopefully that's okay with you guys. You're all friends, right? Good. Good. Yeah. Yeah, so we did a pilot bat garden. It was kind of a project we wanted to do for a while because, you know, I think there's a lot of momentum for gardening for wildlife right now, but I don't know if bats are necessarily always part of that conversation. You know, and a lot of people think, okay, I'm making a bat garden. Am I putting in stuff that, you know, bats are going to pollinate the flowers or nectar flowers, things like that? But for here, it's really about planting the native plants that attract the native insects that our bats are going to eat. So there's kind of like a 1 degree of separation, but I think it's pretty easy to kind of make that leap. So our Gardening for Bats program is new. We're still kind of developing plant lists and doing bat garden pilots. If any of you are interested and have like a public space you think might be a good place to pilot, like we're totally open to that. We're doing a lot of work in Austin and kind of the surrounding areas this year. But this is, as I said, this is our exciting sign. And this QR code will take you to a Gardening for Bats guide, which I'll show you at the end too. So you might say, okay, great, planting native plants for bats, what does that mean? So it's not very different from a pollinator garden or something you might be more familiar with. It's just kind of thinking about things in a little bit of a different way. So bats come out at night. So you want things that don't close their flowers at night. And, you know, that's a couple of different plants I'm sure you could think of off the top of your head. You want things that are really fragrant or kind of stinky, things that attract a lot of insects. So really fragrant flowers are wonderful. Things that are lighter colored, or, you know, things that are host plants for moths. Kind of moths are generally kind of the #1 bat food, I would say, for our insectivorous bats in this area. So thinking about things that moths either lay their eggs on or things that they're attracted to at night, and kind of those whiter colored flowers, white flowers, yellow flowers, you know, light purple, things like that are really wonderful bat plants too. And then, as I mentioned before, a lot of the pests that you have in your garden are, you know, delicious food for bats. So if you have an organic garden, you probably already have bats potentially coming, you know, and eating those insects. And when I say eating those insects, it's, you know, it's after those caterpillars that are eating your kale, after they've gone into their pupa and they've become moths and flown away, then the bats are potentially eating them. So yeah, there's a kind of a lot of different things to think about when you're thinking about a bat garden. And so I just wanted to give you kind of a couple of plant ideas, and this is by no means a comprehensive list. And, you know, we have a plant list for Central Texas, but it's definitely something I think we can always add to. So one thing I did want to mention is, you know, usually when we think about gardens, we think about kind of smaller things, perennials, annuals, kind of more shrubby things, but trees are incredibly important to bats. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this book by Doug Tallamy. It talks about just how amazing oaks are to wildlife. And oak trees are extremely important for bats as well. They provide roosting habitat, but they're also a host plant to a ton of different insect species that bats are going to eat. So if you have oak trees in your yard, you're already doing a wonderful job, and you probably already have bats, because there are different kinds of bats. So, you know, we've got the ones that live under the bridge in Congress Avenue, but there's also bats that are solitary bats that live in trees. So you might have them in your yard and not even realize it. So yeah, I can't say enough about oaks. Have oaks, plant oaks, grow oaks, share oaks with your friends. Oaks are fantastic. And this is just an example of what I'm talking about. So this is an eastern red bat. They curl up to look like a dead leaf. That's kind of how they hide during the day. And they're solitary generally. In the summer, the breeding season, the moms will actually hang out with the pups. And so you might see an eastern red bat with a couple of pups, but usually you don't come across them. And when you do, it's by accident. This was actually taken by a biologist on the Travis County BCP. This is actually Texabama croton, which is not a very common plant. Yeah, but they have a lot of it there. So it was kind of fun to find a bat in sort of a rare plant. But yeah, they just hang out in trees and look like dead leaves, and they're probably there and you just don't realize it. So they're solitary bats. And there's a couple different species of bats that we have that follow that. And then there's also palm trees are really important for bats as well. The northern yellow bat and a couple of other species, they actually will roost in kind of the dead palm fronds that hang down. So a lot of people really like to kind of clean up their palm tree and cut the dead stuff off. But if you leave that on, it's fantastic bat habitat for some of these yellow bats. And again, this is going to be small groups of bats, maybe 1 or 2, at the most maybe 5, that are going to live in these palm fronds. So they're really important. I know palms took a really rough hit during our winter apocalypse last year, but you know, if you have a palm tree and it's still going, that's fantastic. Good for you. Okay, trees and shrubs, again, white flowers, things that smell really fragrant. This is just a couple examples. Kidneywood, which I know people have mixed feelings about. I love it. Do you guys like kidneywood? Okay, great. I've had people yell at me about kidneywood. I guess it can get a little, you know, aggressive. Also, whitebrush is great too. These are all blooming kind of more over a longer period of time than some other things. So this is really great to have. You know, just thinking about providing food for insects as often as possible, having something blooming as much as you can to kind of provide that constant food source throughout the year for bats. And then obviously there's some perennials. Goldenrod is fantastic because it blooms in the fall, and we don't have a lot of fall bloomers. I'm sure you guys have seen goldenrod just covered with pollinators. Those are all things that they attract night pollinators as well that bats are going to be excited about. Purple coneflower, and then I gotta throw in antelope horn. And I don't know how many of you have luck actually growing this in your yard. Okay, 1, 2. Oh, okay, you guys are way out of the game. I have no luck with antelope horn. But yeah, milkweed is fantastic. I'm sure you've noticed if you've looked at any milkweed species, there's a lot of insects on it. And you know, insects love milkweed. It has the white flowers. It attracts a lot of different pollinators. It keeps the flowers open at night. I'm pretty sure. Does anyone know if actually antelope horn closes their flowers at night? Okay, great. You guys are awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so milkweed, gotta love milkweed for many reasons, but for this as well. And then there's lots of annuals you can plant too. Sunflowers are fantastic and very easy to grow. Ringo, Drummond's phlox. There's a lot of other things. I was gonna say basket flower, but I'm pretty sure mine close their flowers at night. But it is a host plant for the moth. So yeah, basket flower. If you grab one of those, you can start your back garden today. Hooray. Thank you, Wilco Nipsa. And then I gotta say agave. And I know, you know, there's kind of questions about which agave are native here, and I don't worry about that too much. I know they can get a little bit, they throw out pups a lot, which is hilarious because that's what bat babies are called too. They're called pups, but agave pups are very common. But agave flowers, when they do bloom, attract tons of different insects all through the day and night. So they're really fantastic. We don't have the nectar feeding bats that are going to come pollinate these here, but they do attract a lot of insects that are going to be great for our bats. And, you know, I do love agave. It's a very beautiful plant. When it does bloom, it's very exciting. My neighbor's is blooming finally, and I'm very, very excited about it. I'm gonna go out there with my bat detector probably in a few days. Yeah, so just other things to think about. Bloom time succession was just that concept of trying to have something blooming as much as you can throughout the year. Here it's hard, I know, because our weather is very unpredictable, and, you know, sometimes things don't do what you want them to do. But I think, you know, if you just kind of have a lot of diversity within your yard, you can really have something blooming throughout most of the year, which is great. Some of our bats do migrate south. Some of them stay here during the winter because it's generally pretty mild. So, you know, you may have bats coming out to feed. If we have like a, you know, winter day that's above 50 degrees, the bats are probably going to come out and look for bugs. So if you have something blooming, fantastic. Dead snags, dead trees are a really wonderful bat roosting habitat. This is a big brown bat, which is the species we have here. They love dead trees. And I know they're not the most beautiful thing in the world, but if you can keep them up and it's not like a safety hazard, dead trees are fantastic for bats. And they also attract a ton of different insects too, just the rotting wood. There's kind of a whole ecosystem within dead and rotting trees, which is really cool. And then this idea of vertical layers, which you're probably familiar with, like even if you have a small space, if you have something growing kind of on each layer of canopy, you're going to have a lot more diversity of insects, which is always good for the bats. So even if you have like a container garden, you can kind of do this too. But just thinking about vertical layers, you know, and having that diversity is fantastic. Okay. And then I get a lot of bat house questions, so I wanted to put it in here. You know, bat houses they can be really wonderful, but I will say they only are kind of good for the species that roost kind of in these larger colonies. So if you put up a bat house here, you're gonna get, if you get bats, you're gonna get Mexican free-tailed bats, which are the ones at the bridge, are the ones at Bracken Cave. You know, there's a lot of them. Generally, that's what you'll get here. But, you know, if you do want to do a bat house, it's fantastic. You want to make sure you buy the right kind of bat house. There's a lot of really bad bat houses on Amazon. There. Whatever they say, don't believe it. There's actually a lot of information on our website, which is at the end of this, about bat houses. If you want to get into it, you can build your own. You know, people will try to sell you like, oh, this poor guy called me once and he was like, I put the bat urine on my bat house and I still don't have any bats. And I'm like, that is not going to work. I'm so sorry that you went through that. So there's a lot of like bat attractants people will sell. None of it works. Basically, what you have to do is just try to kind of follow the directions and kind of put it where it's supposed to go, and then you kind of cross your fingers and hope that the bats will occupy it, because it's kind of a one-size-fits-all model right now for bat houses. And BCI did a big bat house study in the 90s and kind of came up with what we had general recommendations for what to do. So that's what all that is based on. But you know, my dad has had a bat house up in his yard for 2 years and he's really mad at me because he doesn't have bats still. So there's only so much you can do. Yeah.
You know, will wasps keep bats out of it?
Sometimes, yeah. So that's something, generally you do the chambers. So there's actually chambers within the bat house that are usually, if they're the right size, there's usually kind of smaller than wasps like, but it's always good to kind of just go and check and see if wasps are in there, especially around here. Yeah, with like, and they're high up, so maybe just poke it. I don't know. Be careful. Spray with a hose. Yeah, and it's hard to tell sometimes if you have bats in there. Like you can hang out at dusk and see if stuff flies out. You can also look kind of underneath the bat house, and if there's a pile of guano, then you're in business. And you know, you might say, okay, how can I tell that's guano versus like rat droppings? They kind of all look similar, but bat guano is shiny, which is exciting because of all the exoskeletons of all the beetles and things that they're eating. Bat guano is actually kind of sparkly and shiny, so that's a way to tell. Yeah.
What's the best time of year for one?
So I would put it up probably in the late fall or winter and kind of have it in a spot that you like. And then the idea is that the bats that are kind of returning to roost or to breed or to nest, they will occupy that bat house. Yeah. And if you guys have more questions, my email's at the end of this, so feel free to ask me bat health questions. These are kind of our general recommendations. They need 6 hours of sun a day, not really an issue here. You want to make sure that they get kind of that morning sun versus that hot, horrible afternoon sun, because they can overheat. But bats actually do like it fairly hot. So that's kind of something that people are surprised about. We say don't put them in trees, because then they're very, very vulnerable to predators. So you want to kind of far from a tree. You want 12 to 20 feet from the ground, because they come out and they swoop down when they come out of the bat house. So they need a little space to do that. If you put it near a water source, that's really helpful. That'll kind of increase the odds of you getting bats. And then patience, which I know as gardeners, you guys all have bats, right? Yeah. Yeah. Great question. That's 2 slides from now. So yeah, love it. Good question. Yeah, that's a great question. Water. Oh man, water. So these are just our general tips. Keep it organic. Keep your cat inside. At night, at least. I know it's hard. Some cats are just born to be outside. They do eat a ton of birds, which is not my area of expertise. I'm just going to throw that out there. They will eat bats too. I think they have a little bit of a harder time catching them, but we do have videos of bats eating or cats eating bats. So keep your cat inside at night. Also, if you can, keep your yard as dark as possible, especially if you live kind of in closer to the city in an area where there's a lot of light pollution. If your yard is darker, that's better for the insects as well as the bats, because a lot of light pollution can kind of impact their ability to echolocate effectively. But if you do live in like kind of farther out in the country, there's not a lot of lights. If you do have a light, you might notice there's a lot of insects around it. Then that might be okay to leave up. It just kind of depends on where you are. And then water, great question. So bats need about 7 to 10 feet of water to drink, because they actually drink on the wing. So unfortunately, a bird bath is great for a bunch of other stuff, but it's not going to help bats. So bats really need like a pond. A water trough works too. You want to make sure there's nothing, kind of no vegetation in the way. They really need that kind of clear area. They will drink out of people's pools. I don't know if anyone has a pool, has ever seen a bat drinking out of it. Usually happens in like a hot summer. So apparently now in June, early June. Yeah, so they will drink out of pools. I don't think that's like the best water source for them, but sometimes, you know, it's out of necessity. But if you live near a lake or a creek and you're interested in seeing bats, you know, if you go out at dusk and kind of walk around, usually you'll kind of see them drinking, because the first thing they do when they come out is usually take a drink. It's kind of like when you wake up in the morning and you're super thirsty. Same thing with them. They just need to go get a drink of water. Wait, say that again? Say that again?
Oh, I say by drinking from ponds like that, and extending water, that creates a lot of mosquitoes. I think that's also important.
I mean, yeah, and you can always put gambusia in your pond. I highly recommend. They're the mosquito fish you can buy, and they'll live in like anything. I've seen them in like sad puddles with like this much water, and they're still alive. So yeah, you can. I would say, you know, they'll eat a lot of aquatic insects that are emerging from water, definitely, depending on the time of year. So that includes mosquitoes as well. But yeah, if you do have standing water and you're worried about mosquitoes, I would say gambusia are really important. Yeah. Okay, so you can, I think you can still scan this QR code with your phone. I can also send this to Beth and you can share it with the group. We have a guide to gardening for bats, which is just kind of a lot of the general recommendations that I talked about today, and you guys are welcome to download it. But it's kind of a work in progress. But right now that guide is done, which I'm really excited about. Is it working? All right, fantastic. I get excited. Okay, ignore that. That's not related. Ray-Bans for bats. That's us. Okay, so last thing, now that you guys are bat experts, be a bat advocate. I know I still think, even though we live in a very batty place, I like to say, you know, there's still a lot of confusion and fear and misinformation out there about bats, and they're really, really important part of our ecosystem. They're really important to our urban wildlife, and you know, they're very much a part of where we live. So just kind of keeping that in mind, keeping bats in mind when you're picking out plants is fantastic. But yeah, just telling people about bats, it's really fun. And then you get to be like the weird bat person that people text with random questions, which is me. So yeah, that's our website, batcon.org. Lots of cool stuff on there. That's my email. Feel free to reach out if you guys have any questions. I'm happy to share the Central Texas plant list with y'all, as well as the bat gardening guide, and also those to Beth, and you guys can use those. We actually worked with the Wildflower Center on the first iteration of the list. So I don't know. I think it's still kind of a draft, but you know, you guys are happy to run with it because I don't think you can go wrong planting natives, honestly.